So this year, my Comic-Con video is going to be a little bit different. Looking at how much I want to say about the Marvel stuff, and then looking at how much I want to say about everything else, it really just makes sense to make a video on all the Marvel stuff. No disrespect to all the other properties, but I just don't really have that many thoughts on them. Like, yeah, It 2 looks pretty scary, Watchmen looks interesting, Top Gun 2 actually looks pretty good, and like the Tom Cruisiest movie of all time. But really, besides that, I haven't got much. So for now, let's talk about that crazy Marvel Studios panel. I can't remember if I said this in a video or on Twitter, but somewhere I said I would love it if for Phase 4, Marvel did a similar reveal as they did with Phase 3. Because I remember watching that back in 2014, when I was 12 years old, being mind blown and thinking these movies were so far away, but they sounded so cool, and it's a nice memory. And lo and behold, they did exactly that kind of reveal again. And that fact alone, not even looking at what they announced, made me smile. I actually watched some of it in that Variety video, that is, the parts that weren't cut or actually had audio. Nice work here, Variety, but anyway, let's get into it. First up, there's The Eternals, which is going to be released on November 6th, 2020, and will be directed by Chloe Zhao, the director of some apparently very good films that I haven't seen yet. There were already a lot of rumors about this film, but it was nice to have many of them confirmed and also get some new information. The cast was revealed. Lauren Ridloff will play Makkari, Brian T. Henry will play Fastos? Salma Hayek will play Ajak, Don Lee will play Gilgamesh, Leah McHugh will play Sprite, Kumail Nanjiani will play Ingo, Richard Madden will play Icarus, and Angelina Jolie will play Thena. Pretty all-star cast. I'm especially excited to see Richard Madden in the MCU, great in Game of Thrones, and more recently, he was fantastic in Rocketman, and Kumail is also always quite fun. In case you couldn't tell from my very accurate pronunciation of those names, I'm not very familiar with the Eternals, and neither are most people. Luckily, they did explain it a bit. Richard Madden said that they were sent by the Celestials to defend mankind, and they're these crazy, weird, basically immortal alien beings. However, the director said that this will be a very human movie, despite the fact that these characters are crazy, weird, basically immortal alien beings. And I think that's a really interesting idea. Taking such powerful characters and telling a very human story with them. I think this could be another Guardians of the Galaxy situation, where right now they're characters that most people don't really know, and then after this film, they'll become very well known in pop culture. There was also some concept art released, and this film will feature not only an LGBT character, but will also feature the first deaf actor and character in the MCU, which is really cool. Overall, don't really know what to expect, but I'm interested to see where this goes. Then, right in the middle of the Marvel Hall H presentation, it was revealed that Avengers Endgame had become the highest grossing film of all time. Honestly, I didn't think it was going to happen, because after the re-release, initially, it didn't seem like it was going to make it, but they made it. Well done. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really matter, but hey, at least now Anthony Mackie won't have to be embarrassed on his Twitter. I guess it is nice that the culmination of an 11-year franchise that so many people are passionate about is the biggest movie of all time. Then came the Falcon and Winter Soldier panel, which really should be the Captain America and Winter Soldier panel, since Falcon is the new Captain America. Or will he just keep the name Falcon? I don't know, but Anthony Mackie did come out with the shield. The show will come out fall 2020, and it was confirmed that Zemo is coming back, which is awesome news. I think he's the perfect villain for this kind of show. He'll also be getting his iconic mask in this. There were some images released later on in the week. I'm very excited for that, since he is actually one of the more interesting and successful villains in the MCU, even if he isn't physically a match for most of the Avengers. So I'm curious to see how his intricate planning will play into this. Also, Agent 13 will be back in this. Honestly, I'm extremely excited for the show. I love Falcon, I like Bucky, I really like their dynamic together.
I hate you.
I like the villain they're going up against. I think the action scenes could be very cool, given what we've seen before with these characters. And I love a fun buddy team-up, so I'm very excited for this. Besides the Zemo confirmation though, there wasn't a hell of a lot revealed about this at Hall H.
Makes them tick. What ticks them all? How much ticking can that clock do before that tick go tock and that tock go boom?
Then, another rumored film was confirmed, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which will be released on February 12th, 2021. Simu Liu will play Shang-Chi. He was cast the Tuesday before this Comic-Con. He seems to be a fun guy, based on how he was at Hall H and on his Twitter. Marvel casting is usually pretty on point, so I have confidence he'll be good. The director, Destin Daniel Cretton, gave quite a heartwarming message about diversity in the MCU. Awkwafina was revealed to be in the film, which has a lot of people excited. By all accounts, she's a great actress. I'm looking forward to the action scenes in this, since Shang-Chi is the master of Kung Fu, so I'm hoping for some very well done martial arts scenes here. Maybe we'll get what I was hoping we'd get from Iron Fist. What really pleasantly surprised me about this is the fact that the Mandarin, the real Mandarin, will be the main villain in this. I really didn't think they'd do this, because we already had that kind of Mandarin build-up and payoff in Iron Man 3, and I feel like Marvel would think, well, if we do it again, people will be confused. But I think they're banking on the idea that by the time this comes out, the people seeing this will either be hardcore MCU fans, who know the lore well and know that he wasn't the real Mandarin, and that the real Mandarin is out there, or they'll be casual fans who simply don't remember Iron Man 3. Whatever they decided there, I'm just really happy we get to see this. He should be an awesome villain. Also, the way they kind of set this up at the presentation, like they've been planning this film since the very beginning, I don't think they really have. I think they just dropped in these Easter eggs and thought, yeah, maybe we'll do something with that down the line. We'll see. But now that they're putting that character in, it is kind of cool that there have been hints to it since the very start. Anyway, this movie sounds like a cool idea, and even though right now we don't know much about it, I'm thinking and hoping that at the very least in terms of action, this will stand out in the MCU. And hopefully this character will be an interesting new addition. Then, onto one of these Phase 4 properties that I'm not as crazy about as some of the others, WandaVision, coming spring 2021. I mean, I don't hate this idea at all, we don't really know much about it, and it could be something really exceptional, but I've never been very invested in Wanda and Vision's relationship. I did like Wanda a lot in Endgame though, and exploring more of her character, a character that's experienced so much loss and tragedy, could be fascinating. It's confirmed that this will take place after Endgame, and I was curious if here they were even going to address the fact that Vision was dead the last time we saw him, and they kind of did. Paul Bettany basically said he also thought he was dead, and he really doesn't know what's going on.
I have no idea.
Which is either him just not spoiling the show, or he's another Marvel actor who really doesn't pay attention to the storylines of these films.
That was Spider-Man.
That was Spider-Man?
Either way, I'm curious to see how they bring him back, and maybe he's not the same, or doesn't have the same memories, or the same personality, or something like that. It could make something that I didn't think was awfully interesting. Who knows? I'm staying optimistic. Tiana Paris will also be in this as a grown-up Monica Rambeau, which surprised me, both that they're having that character show up again this early, and also that she's showing up in this, a property that presumably doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with Captain Marvel. But hey, that just speaks to how interconnected they're making this universe, in small ways and or ways I wouldn't expect. More on that later on. They also said that this is going to be weird, which I'm on board for, with these characters that are pretty weird in quite a few ways.
She's weird.
Feige said, if you think that logo's weird, just wait till you see the show, so I'm interested to see what he meant by that. More magic stuff? Revived super intelligent androids with magic? I don't know. I'm at least curious to see where this goes. Now, speaking of weird logos, the Loki Show is up next, also being released in the spring of 2021. There was also some similar confusion with this show, given that the last time we saw Loki, well, people were wondering what version of Loki would be in the show, if he was going to come back to life, because that would be in character, but also it would cheapen his death in Infinity War, or if it's a prequel. Well, it's kind of a prequel, but kind of not. The Loki Show will follow the 2012 version of Loki from Endgame who escaped using the Tesseract, which at first I thought, oh, that seems like kind of an oddly specific version of Loki to use for the show, but then I realized people who watch the Loki Show also probably have seen Endgame. So hey, I actually like this idea. It's not resurrecting him again, technically, and it's not a traditional prequel. I mean, it is a prequel, but it's in a different timeline. There's the fact that he's a different character from the one we've gotten to know. He doesn't have any of the development from the next two films, but that's kind of another reason I'm excited for this. It means they can have a character arc for Loki in this, because his arc was pretty much done.
Odin's son.
So like, where do you go from here? But if he's 2012 Loki, then yeah, he's got plenty of growing to do. And that doesn't necessarily need to be in the exact same way as he did in the films. And hey, Avengers Loki is also very charismatic and fun regardless. So overall, I think if you had to make a Loki show after Infinity War, this is one of the better ways they could have had that character come back. The premise of this, of Loki throughout history messing with events, also sounds fun. Ultimately, most of this looks really great to me. Except for that logo. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Moving on, we've got Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, coming May 7th, 2021. Although to be honest, I think the more important news is that it was Benedict Cumberbatch's birthday, and everyone's saying happy birthday for him, and it was really wholesome.
Happy birthday to you!
There are quite a few things about this I'm looking forward to. Firstly, the fact that this will be the first scary MCU movie. Now, like I've said probably a billion times in this channel, horror isn't really my thing, but I can definitely appreciate it when it's done well, and mixing it with another genre like a superhero action film I think is a really cool idea. Also, with the first film, it was Doctor Strange in a classic MCU movie, with the action and the comedy and all that. And I did think the comedy was one of the weaker parts of that film, or rather, that kind of MCU formula was one of the blander parts of Doctor Strange. And what set it apart were the visuals, and when it started to move away from that formula. So putting this character in a more serious, potentially scary film, I think could be a great direction to take him. Also, Nightmare will be the villain, who I don't know much about, but from what I've gathered, he's this entity in the dream dimension, and basically he's all about going into your mind and your subconscious and making nightmare-like scenarios, which sounds like a villain who could lead to some good horror stuff. Also, I'm imagining this film will go, Strange starts in the real world, then goes into the multiverse that we've seen bits of in Ant-Man and Endgame and the first Doctor Strange, and then he kind of gets trapped in there, in more and more layers of it, and throughout the film slowly has to work his way out of it. No, we don't know if that's what it's going to be, and I'm not trying to get super excited over an idea that I've just made up, but everything they've said about it and the title, to me, seem to point to something at least like that. So, it could be something totally different and still be great, but at the moment, that's what it sounds like to me, and I really like that idea. Something else that I think is great is how they're apparently going to handle his character. I said this in a video a while back, but I feel like Doctor Strange is one of these characters who works better in an ensemble cast. A character who kind of drops in, or is part of a larger team, or something like that. For me, that's when he's been his most interesting and worked best as a character. But here, they sort of addressed that, and said that in the Avengers, and even in Thor, he seems kind of like the adult, like he has a lot of authority and power, and generally now, after his film, he seems to know what he's doing. And in this, they're going to take that character and put him in a situation where he's kind of out of his depth, which I think will make it more interesting. He's insanely powerful now, so putting him in this insane situation, like being trapped in the multiverse, is a good idea. It could make the film more tense while keeping the awesome magic action stuff we've seen in the latest Avengers films, and could lead to his character getting more developed or becoming more interesting, seeing him in this more vulnerable state and having to figure a way out of it. The other big news is that Scarlet Witch is going to be in this, and that WandaVision ties directly into it. So given that we know very little about WandaVision, that doesn't tell us much, but it is an interesting matchup of two characters with relatively similar powers, and who are, I'd say, among the top 5 most powerful heroes in the MCU. Plus, I've really enjoyed the other team-ups or appearances of other heroes we've seen in the MCU films lately. This is more of these movies no longer just being solo films, but embracing the crossover potential of this universe. So yeah, it sounds like they're going to get a chance to be even more creative with both the visuals and the story here. I can't wait. Then, another Disney Plus show Marvel is making, their animated What If show, which will be released in the summer of 2021. This will follow different scenarios in the MCU. So, for example, I believe the first episode will be what if Peggy Carter became Captain America? And that kind of stuff, which I think is a fascinating concept for a show. It has so much potential because of the nature of this cinematic universe. It's unprecedented having this many films tied to one long narrative, but still having those singular stories. And so you can then revisit and go back to these individual stories and do fun stuff like this and mess with it. It's similar to what they did with the time travel in Endgame, and how well that worked because of how naturally this universe has grown over the years. Again, more on that later. For this, Jeffrey Wright will narrate the show as the Watcher, who we got to look at in the form of some concept art, and then we got a list of the actors who will be returning to voice their characters in animated form for these what ifs. And in terms of characters, this means we'll be seeing new scenario stories with Killmonger, Bucky, Thanos, Hulk, Loki, Fury, Thor, Peggy, T'Challa, Nebula, Hawkeye, Ant-Man, Hank Pym, Dum-Dum Dugan, Howard Stark, not that one, Kraglin, Jane Foster, Ant-Man's friend, I think his name is Kurt, Erskine, Korg, Zola, Korath, the Grandmaster, Yondu, and Taserface. So yeah, a lot of potential stories here. Then, a little bit of a surprise for me, it had been rumored, but not as heavily as some of these other shows, we're getting a Hawkeye show on Disney Plus in the fall of 2021. It's crazy, because I remember back in 2015, people saying Hawkeye should get a Marvel show on Netflix, because that's a kind of medium his character is much better suited for, and now I think they've definitely learned how to utilize him in the films, but the fact that we're getting this show now to explore that character in a more small-scale way is still really great. Jeremy Renner is of course coming back, and the show will be centered around him training Kate Bishop to be the new Hawkeye. I thought Kate Bishop was going to be Catherine Langford in Endgame, but she wasn't even in Endgame in the end, and if it was going to be Langford, I feel like they would have announced that at Hall H, since it was already so heavily rumored. But hey, we'll see. The point is, I like this character a lot, and I'm interested to see where he goes after Endgame. Because I did enjoy that he got that happy ending, and I mean, most of them did, but for his character in particular, I would enjoy it if he does get to keep that happy ending, since he keeps almost getting that and then gets dragged back into the superhero world. I mean, he can come back into that world sometimes in the show, I imagine he will, but ultimately, passing on the more heavy, dangerous mission stuff to a new Hawkeye with him training her in the background sounds like a good idea, both story-wise and character-wise. He's also going to share his experience with her of what it's like being a superhero without superpowers, which we've only gotten hints of before, so exploring that more could be fascinating. We're also going to get some flashbacks in this to see more of Clint's time as Ronin, so we can potentially dive more into his character and how his family's death drove him to that point, and now that his family's back, his regrets and maybe what he learned from that time. Plus, that action scene in Endgame was really well done, so I'm on board for more of that. Ultimately, I'm excited for this too. I don't know if there's one of these that I'm not going to be excited for. I mean, I'm just giving my honest take. I do think these sound like some pretty awesome ideas. Then we're getting the 4th Thor movie, Thor: Love and Thunder, on November 5th, 2021. If I told you in 2014 that Thor would be the only character in the MCU to get a 4th solo film, I don't know if you would have believed me. But I suppose it makes sense now. Cap and Tony's stories are done. Thor's the only one of the original three who had more of a story to tell. They basically reinvented his character in Ragnarok, made it even more interesting in Infinity War, and, well, made some interesting choices in Endgame. But the point is, he's now kind of a new character who people really like and who has more potential to explore. So I wasn't very surprised when they confirmed this fourth film. Taika Waititi is coming back to direct, he's also coming back as Korg, and Tessa Thompson will be back as Valkyrie. There was also talk of Valkyrie being one of the first LGBT heroes in the MCU.
As new king, she needs to find her queen.
Which I believe was also mentioned when Ragnarok was coming out. Thompson also said in terms of what Valkyrie is doing as the leader of Asgard, that Asgard is not a place, it's a people, and that she's creating a refuge for any person who might need it. As far as if they'll bring Fat Thor back, I kind of doubt it. I think that was a one-off for Endgame. Maybe they'll do a training montage at the start of the film or something like that. I also don't know how this affects Guardians 3. Like, Guardians 3 will come out after this, but maybe the Guardians will have a brief cameo in this at the start, dropping Thor off wherever he's going, and then Thor actually won't be in Guardians 3, as many people, including myself, thought he was going to be. That has yet to be seen. Chris Hemsworth mentioned Netflix during this presentation that heavily featured Disney Plus properties, which probably had Kevin Feige dying on the inside a little bit.
You got a little Netflix subscription?
But anyway, arguably the biggest piece of news is that Natalie Portman is back, and not only is she back, she's gonna be female Thor. I really didn't think they were gonna go this route. I thought they might have female Thor, but I definitely didn't think they'd have Portman back. She hasn't seemed very interested in playing this character after Thor 2. The fact that she showed up in Endgame made me think maybe she's coming back, but then I learned afterwards that that was all archival footage from Thor 2, so again, didn't expect this, but hey, I'm looking forward to seeing what Taika Waititi does with this character and how they work female Thor into the story, and possibly, or probably, this universe going forward. I mean, to me, Jane Foster's character wasn't that memorable, but Portman was always quite good in these films, so I'm on board with her coming back. I enjoyed Ragnarok quite a lot. If this movie keeps the humor and style from Ragnarok and just has a little more heart to it, I think it could be one of the best MCU films. And finally, they talked about the Black Widow film coming May 1st, 2020. Firstly, the cast and director were confirmed. Kate Shortland will be directing, and along with Scarlett Johansson, Florence Pugh will star as Yelena Belova, who's kind of a sisterly figure to Natasha. David Harbour will be Alexei, aka the Red Guardian, who is basically the Russian version of Captain America. O.T. Fagbenley will be Mason, someone who knew Natasha before she worked for S.H.I.E.L.D., and while the relationship was supposed to be professional, there are some romantic undertones. And Rachel Weisz will be Melina, another spy from the Red Room who will probably be some kind of villain, possibly Iron Maiden, as many have theorized. That's a pretty great cast. I'm most familiar with Harbour and Weisz, and those are both actors I'm very excited to see brought into the MCU, especially Weisz in a possible villainous role. There was also more info about the film. Taskmaster will be one of the villains in it, and we got some concept art for that. The film will show us more about Black Widow's past and her flawed side, and how she tries to wipe out that red in her ledger, and it'll take place in between Civil War and Infinity War. Everyone in Hall H also got a hat, and then they showed some footage, which has yet to get leaked online, since Marvel's Hall H footage security is pretty top-notch, which keeps me thinking that when something Marvel-related gets leaked from Comic-Con, it's because Marvel lets it get leaked. Anyway, here are some descriptions of the footage, which will be almost as riveting as the footage itself, I assure you. It starts with a montage of Black Widow from the MCU films with that voiceover from the Endgame sandwich scene.
I used to have nothing, and then I got this job, this family.
Then there's an establishing shot with Budapest flashing on the screen, so I'm guessing in addition to some of the film taking place there, we'll get to hear more about what happened there with her and Clint. There's a fight scene between Natasha and Yelena, although even though it's a very intense fight, they talk afterwards, and it's really just that sister-esque spy kind of relationship. The action's said to be very grounded, like Winter Soldier type action. Then there's a montage of some more grounded spy action, a motorcycle chase, and then a bit of a fight scene with Black Widow and Taskmaster. If you want more detailed descriptions, you can look it up, but that's the general gist of it. I'm sure we'll be seeing it within a few months. The way the action was described has me excited. I've been waiting for more of that grounded Winter Soldier style action, which honestly I think is the best action in any MCU film, because even when it showed up briefly in other films, I didn't feel like it had the same impact, given how crazy some of the other action got there. So a more grounded movie, once again, after all this crazy Infinity War Endgame stuff, sounds like a welcome next step. As far as the film itself, well, yes, I think it could be interesting to explore this character more. I'll be honest, I do think it's kind of weird that they're making this movie now. Like, after Endgame, it seems like the MCU is moving in a different direction, away from the original Avengers. Plus, she just died. Seems a little like the same timing of having Solo right after Han was killed in The Force Awakens. But hey, if they do have a good reason for exploring this character further, and they do it well, plus adding some of that more grounded, brutal, Jason Bourne-esque spy action, this could be a good launching off point for Phase 4. Those are all the properties coming up with release dates. Kevin Feige also confirmed that they're working on the Fantastic Four, that the MCU will give them the level of quality that they deserve, X-Men, that the MCU will give us a different take on them that we haven't seen before, Captain Marvel 2 and Black Panther 2 are in development, James Gunn later confirmed on Twitter that Guardians 3 is being made, but it'll be made after the Suicide Squad, and then the last big announcement of the night was that Mahershala Ali will be playing Blade. Now, a few things on this. Firstly, just my instant reaction was, that's an awesome casting choice. Mahershala Ali is a terrific actor. Then my second thought was, well, I guess that's really the nail in the coffin for the Netflix shows. I mean, Mariah Dillard also crossed over into the films as a different character, but it would be kind of weird if they brought back Luke Cage now with one of his major villains being cast as a completely different character in the films. That being said, I am also kind of excited by that, because while I thought Mahershala was one of the best parts of Luke Cage Season 1...
What?
I was a bit disappointed that now we won't be able to see him again in the MCU. But here we are. They didn't have much info about the film. I don't know if they'll make it R-rated. We'll just have to wait and see. But once again, it seems like Marvel's knocked it out of the park with their casting. And I'm curious to see how this character and the kind of stories he's usually a part of will fit into the larger MCU, both tonally and in terms of how his character will interact with others in this world. So now here at the end, just some more overall takeaways that I had from these announcements. First of all, I really do enjoy how incredibly goofy the MCU is going with these titles now. Love and Thunder, In the Multiverse of Madness, The Legend of the Ten Rings. These sound like titles of comics from the 60s and 70s. And, you know, maybe that's just something they're doing for the titles, but to me, it seems indicative of the direction the MCU is going and has been going for a while. In that now that it's so big and the audience is so guaranteed that they can do pretty much whatever they want. Which, when you hear that, it could sound like a bad thing, like, oh, if the audience is guaranteed, they'll just stop trying. But I think they're taking it as, if the audience is guaranteed, we can get more creative and weird with it. I feel like that mentality has been slowly growing for a while, and already I think it's led to some of the most interesting MCU films so far. So I'm glad it seems like they're going to keep going in that direction. This is also something I've talked about a bit before, like with Endgame, but especially from seeing this slate of shows and movies, I really love how interconnected they're making this. With these TV shows and movies, you do actually have to keep up with them to understand what happens in the next part. Which, on the one hand, sure, could alienate some people, but for those who keep up with it, it's incredibly rewarding in terms of experiencing this larger story. Smaller chapters all weaving together into this larger narrative. Like, you didn't have to watch the Netflix shows or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to understand the films, and I think that's absolutely fine for those shows, but it's also a very cool idea to have these directly tie in. And also having very specific stuff, like Monica Rambeau coming back in WandaVision, or having the real Mandarin now be a part of the films, or even Natalie Portman returning. Again, this is something I felt with Endgame. These are the choices that I don't really expect from a huge multi-billion-dollar film studio. Usually, with these kinds of plans, you can see where it's going, who they're going to bring back and who they aren't, not just within the story, but also sometimes because of outside factors. Like, a huge studio wouldn't want to tell this kind of story or get this actor back. Even the MCU has had some of that, like when Phase 2 started, and you knew, okay, no big Avengers are going to show up in Iron Man 3 or Thor 2. But with the MCU now, they actually are doing that quite a bit these days, which leads to some very fun surprises, and also leads to the universe feeling more personal in an interesting way. Like, it's actually people thinking about this, and not just a giant corporation making giant corporation decisions. I do find it fascinating how the MCU is probably the most mainstream franchise right now, but it still feels very personal to the fans. It doesn't feel like because it's so mainstream, they're toning it down or simplifying it at the expense of the story, especially with this franchise's unique way of telling that story. If anything, they've done the opposite and just upped it, connecting these stories in more cool and satisfying ways and having more crossovers in one big universe. Bottom line is, I really love the unprecedented direction they seem to be taking the MCU in terms of storytelling. So, this is all of Phase 4. Black Widow, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Eternals, Shang-Chi, WandaVision, Doctor Strange 2, Loki, What If, Hawkeye, and Thor 4. The previous phases went on for longer periods of time, but this has pretty much the same amount of content, if not more, considering some of these are shows. So it's a ton of stuff in a pretty small time frame. I'm on board for that. I also love how these Disney Plus shows are being treated like films, in terms of being up there as a big part of this Phase 4 slate. The budget, the way they'll connect to the films, it sounds exactly like the kind of show I'd love to see from the MCU, with these characters and stories that maybe are more suited to a show rather than a film. It just has me even more excited for them. So those were my thoughts on the slate for Marvel's Phase 4. Which of these films or TV shows are you most excited for? Let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comments. Also, I feel like I should just mention this in a video. These days, I'm taking a bit of a break from social media. I'm still working on YouTube stuff, but as far as Twitter and Instagram, if I'm on it, I won't be on it very often. How long will this go on? I'm not sure. I'm just not going to be on it as often. So if I don't respond to DMs for a while or post a picture or tweet something, don't worry, everything's fine. I'm just not going to be on it as often. With that in mind, follow me on Instagram and Twitter at BHL_Hudson. I'll probably still plug it at the end of my videos, cause hey, I don't know when I'm gonna get back into it again. Anyway, I'll figure that out. I also have a second channel where I make videos and podcasts with a friend of mine. It's called The Poorly Planned Podcast, even though these days we do more videos than podcasts. I'm discovering right now that I should probably change some stuff here. Anyway, check it out, it's fun. And subscribe here for more videos like the one you just watched. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.